Hey, that's a lot of Bollotta.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Bollotta-FIDE, your one and only pod for events and entertainment. I'm Anthony Bollotta.
And I'm Alexia Christina Postolides. And today we have with us the president of the Breining Group, an advisor and instructor for the SDSU School of Hospitality and Tourism Management Master's Program, Terri Breining. The senior program manager at Oracle and MPI chapter president, Megan Powers, and the founding director of the Payne School of Hospitality and Tourism Management, Carl Winston.
Hi, y'all. Thank you so much for joining us today. We brought you together because we wanted to talk about Global Meetings Industry Day. That is the brainchild of the Events Industry Council, meant to bring awareness to the global meetings industry. And they do so through research and a report that is about to be released in just a few days. So we'd like to get started with the discussion. Let's start with you, Megan, and the GMID. Tell us why it's so important. Why is GMID such an important initiative?
Well, before it came about, I feel like there wasn't any one way to celebrate our industry and not just celebrate, but show the industry what kind of an impact that we have on economies, local, regional, national, globally, really. The impact that everything we do, from a cab driver all the way through, a full band at a party and everything in between with meetings and whatnot, it affects so many people's incomes and economies. And I think that, there just hadn't really been a way. I think we all got a wake up call in 2008, 2009, right? Like the lack of need for events got into the news and everything, and then I think that everything that's been done since then has been to sort of like counteract all of the bad press and all of that kind of stuff, because it affects so many people.
Terri, Carl, anything you'd like to add? Terri?
Yeah, I think that, business events have been part of business always, right? And people of influence have always known the importance of them and the value of them. Unfortunately, some of those people don't have an understanding of the importance of the people that produce those events, and they suffer from the illusion. Some that you just say we're going to have this event and it sort of happens itself. Clearly, that doesn't happen. But there's been a real misunderstanding about not the importance of events, but the nature of what it takes to produce them. And so I think that, and that's why, as Megan referenced, when we hit a tough economic speed bump, it happened in 08, 09, certainly happened in 2001, right? And it's happened in a few other times like that. One of the reactions of these organizations that have events is that it's one of the first things that they cut, and they either cut the budgets or they cut the people or whatever, and the impact of those decisions can be really long lasting, like sometimes years, because it affects sales pipeline, production, innovation, and all that sort of thing. And so it's felt for years, but they don't know. They just know this is the easiest thing to cut. And so I think that this study is important to confirm and verify the impact of events well beyond the event itself.
Carl, anything you'd like to
I'd
add?
like to maybe take that in two bites. First one is I completely agree with what Megan and Terri shared, and especially on the historical side of events. Events have been produced since the beginning of time. I mean, markets are events. Like, we have our farmers markets in our communities. Well, markets like that were being produced 2,000, 3,000 years ago, so people could buy vegetables and trade fur and spices and anything else. So this notion of those events thousands of years ago, they had an organizer. And yet that person's never written about. Like, who organized the first Babylonian market? Like, you never hear about that famous event producer from that era, but somehow that actually happened because those events didn't just magically appear. So there's a historic context that sort of suggests these have been around forever in many, many verticals and entertainment and Rome and Colosseum. Somebody had to come up with the idea, like, who's headlining today? Is it Anthony? Hopefully it's not Anthony
Likely
headlining
not.
at Colosseum, but again, that you never hear about the person who organized, like, the Lions versus the Romans in the Colosseum. You never heard about that famous event producer, but you hear about the event. And we all know about the event. And so I think that a theme that I'm hearing from our other two speakers, and I certainly want to reinforce, is we don't get no respect, when you produce events.
True.
And I think that kind of gets into my second thought about what the study can do for us and kind of what we're struggling with. And that is, I don't know a single person on the planet that I've met who hasn't planned an event. And so they're all experts, because they planned a birthday party. They planned an event after work to celebrate somebody's retirement. They invited friends to their house. So they're all experts because they've done it. Whereas very few of us have done, been a CFO or the CMO of an organization. And so because everybody's done events, a lot of people assume they can do it. And I think that's the story that really needs to be told, is this is a profession with really rigorous standards to do it right.
And we are talking about,
or they toss it to their executive assistant, right? Like, oh, Susie can
Right.
plan this because she does everything else for me. Kind of.
You never toss the marketing plan to the executive assistant for some reason.
Right. Well, it's
Exactly.
social. Meetings are social, so they need a social planner. But we are talking specifically about business events and not so much about social events. So, I spoke to Jason from the Events Industry Council. I tried to get a little bit of information about what we might expect on Wednesday when the report comes out. But, he was very coy and closed-lipped about it. I'd like to ask you, any thoughts about what might be revealed in these upcoming numbers that we're expecting on Wednesday? Would you like to?
Well,
Sorry.
Go ahead, Megan, and then Terry.
Well, I was just going to say, so in 2014, I got my master's in communication and leadership studies, and I decided to do my thesis on events, face-to-face versus online events in the context of trade shows. So that's what I did my thesis on. I wanted to do broader, but it had to be more specific. But really, what you have to do a lit review when you do a thesis, and there was the only research I could find on meetings and events was done weirdly by IT people who were like referring to their conferences of them getting together and these studies, this data that they gathered, which just made it super obvious to me that we're not doing enough to get the word out there, to study what it is we do and then share it with the world. So, and sometimes it's sponsored too, right? So then people go like, oh, well, can you really, trust that data? So I think that we're going to be surprised and not surprised. I think it's going to be, things are slowing down. There's so much uncertainty. Global, maybe global events in the certain parts of the world are not going to be happening. I personally don't think that we're going to be surprised by much, but I really want to see the data so that we can share it with the world of the impact that we're having.
Terry, you have a thought?
Yeah, I think that for years, those of us in the event industry talked about financial impact really in terms of our own event, right? So it was revenue and it was expenses, and if we got the numbers right, then it was a success. And it's really been in the last, I don't know, maybe 10, 20 years that we've looked at broader impact. In that, looking at events as part of a broader marketing strategy. I mean, they have been that for a lot of organizations, but a lot of people in the industry haven't behaved like that. And so looking at, first of all, events as part of the broader marketing strategy, part of the larger overall objectives is really important because it sort of looks beyond just the details of the single event. So it lives in a larger ecosystem. I also think that as we talk about the broader economic impact of events, not only on the organization holding them, but on the industry that they represent, because they are being the public is being introduced to that industry. It's in the form of this one organization, but it's like awareness grows based on that. But also the economic impact of a community, right? When an organization brings a conference to San Diego, as an example, it's not just that organization that is impacted. It's certainly the hotel, it's the restaurants, it's often the convention center, it's the attractions, it's all the people that support those organizations. Yes. That's huge economic impact. And recently, Oxford Economics is one of the organizations that has been doing studies on destinations. So I think they're exactly the right partner for sure for the Event Industry Council to be working with. But I think sort of the larger impact for us, those of us that work in the industry, is that we collectively need to become more fluent in talking about economic impact, and not just this event, not just my budget, but the broader economic impact. And I think to the degree that we do that, we get the respect that Carl was talking about, and we get the awareness that, holy cow, this event isn't like just a throwaway, really cool party. This has long-term impact, positive and negative. But we have to become fluent in that language. And I think this study can help us, first of all, with data. Secondly, to give us the language and the stories so that we can all tell a more collective, coherent story that is understood outside of our industry, because we have our own secret language, right?
Yes.
And nobody understands it. So, yeah.
And you mentioned 9/11 and 2008, 2009 when we had the economic downfall here. It seems to me that this became more important during COVID when industries were faced with really having to advocate for themselves to get dollars. Is that a fair assessment? And Carl, would you say that it's really possible to do a financial overview of the entire industry, of all of those people that actually are impacted by the industry? Is that really possible, do you think?
I think I do think it's possible. I think whether people believe it is another issue, because a lot of economic impact studies are done and there's no unified methodology. And so oftentimes people will hear something like there's $1 billion worth of economic impact. It's like, what does that even mean? And I think it's a matter of how it gets defined, the data. But there's certainly a lot of evidence, and I know we do this here in my school at this university. We do economic impact studies all the time on different things. And we're pretty rigorous about how we sample and build out a data set to do that. And you can get pretty darn accurate. So when we have the Holiday Bowl come into town, we can feel really confident we can build up the business case for how much economic impact and how much business is actually transacted. And we do that by looking at, who are the corporate sponsors, who's buying suites, who's doing business entertainment to retain their clientele. And this sort of leads me into another thought, Anthony, which is this. You asked about what are we going to do with this study and what's it going to say? Well, the ship has sailed. Event production and marketing are now intertwined in business. It's just how you activate new products and
how you tell a story.
You got to tell a story, and people want to be in. It's more than just selling toothpaste. It's like this is a whole business model that it gets these activations. And look at the transaction activity that's been going on. Freeman bought Sparks. I mean, they bought a $2 billion marketing company. It's like that's big news. And I think the merger of marketing and events is maybe going to be the biggest news story for this decade, because I think that ship has sailed.
What about the fact that I'm going to conjecture and say most of us have not had a year that we're, raising the roof over? It's been difficult these last few months. So do we feel that the data may sway or not really give us a full picture of what 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 the industry is capable of doing. It seems to me like we need a series of years to really determine what we're worth.
Can I jump in on this? Because I have a
Please.
theory that I've been thinking about coming up to this podcast. And one of the things that I think we can really identify is that somebody's figured out how good an industry this is. It's cyclical, as we all know, where there's good times and bad. But the people who've recently figured out how great this industry is private equity and venture capital.
Mm.
And they're buying up DMCs, they're buying up third-party businesses, and private equity financed the Freeman acquisition of Sparks that I mentioned. So these guys are pretty smart, or guys and gals are pretty darn smart. And I think as capital is attracted into our industry for the first time, like really meaningful capital, that's a good sign that we're on the right path as an industry and that we're finally getting recognized for the work being done and the profit margins that are possible when you do it right.
Yeah, well, and I work for a very large corporation that does huge events, and I will say that sponsorship dollars are up. Like it's for the flagship event, 5x what they raised in sponsorship dollars in that going back to 22, I think. So now we're at 5x that. So it's but they're spending money. Companies, I think, are spending money in different ways, but there is an importance. It's even with it, and especially with maybe the emergence of AI, because now the only way we know we're actually talking to someone who's real is if we're face to face. And obviously companies, large corporations, a top, whatever is Fortune 25 or whatever, wouldn't still be investing insane amounts of money in events if they weren't driving revenue. So I think if a story like that can get told on a global level, then would we be making some progress?
That brings up a question for me, which is how does that impact the small players? Because this is a community that's been largely made up of small players until, this advent of money coming into the industry and private equity. Any thoughts about that? Was it going to be more difficult for the small players? Is it going to be better for the small players? Any thoughts?
When I had my agency, it was a small agency, and one of the ways that we had some success was the person-to-person encounter that Megan just talked about, right? I mean, and we didn't have AI then, but certainly it was that personal service. I would like to believe, I don't know about that, Anthony, but I would like to believe that there is still room. If there's room for events and face-to-face events, there is still room for the personal interaction that creates them. So I don't know. It would be a tough time to have an agency for me right now. It's not because I don't know that it's going to be harder, but it's certainly different. It'll be interesting. My hope is that there's still room for small companies, for entrepreneurs, for people who have, not the venture capital money.
I feel pretty strongly that there's going to continue to be all levels of need. It's just we've never had mega companies like this. I mean, I'm not going to hire, if I have a storefront business, I'm not hiring George P. Johnson to produce my annual event. Like they're not even going to want to talk to me. So I think there's going to be an appropriate sized event producer for every organization of every size. And the other thing I'd think, and maybe Megan can speak to it, but I got to imagine, Megan, in your organization that you don't just hire one person to produce your mega event. There's a host of people in that ecosystem who are supporting you, and they might be an event marketing firm, and it might be this and that. Is that sort of true?
Oh yeah, for sure. I've never worked for a company that had more than 200 people before, so that's where I'm coming from. I'm definitely been on both ends and been in I worked at AV Concepts, I worked at All Star Event Productions, I worked for small companies that, where we were trying to fight against the man, against these big firms. And as an example, I'm actually a contractor. I'm 2.5 years I've been there. I'm still a contractor, not full time. And on my team, there's 7 people on my team. 3 of us are contractors. On the all industry call before AI World last year, there were 125 people from across 4 or 5 different agencies. So they are, yes, absolutely having to supplement. And I've been working on these industry events where I've been doing like everything. And now we get into this huge event, right, where they're dividing and conquering, they've always been, and I think it makes sense when for large events, the wanting to use different agencies so they don't rely on any one, because if anything goes wrong, then you're really in trouble.
In the
Yeah.
production, so sorry to interrupt, but in the production world, we've actually faced the idea that we have a behemoth in the market, and it did impact us smaller players quite a bit, and continues to impact us. They're still in the business, but what we have found is they've really changed the production business for all of us small players. Costs have increased. It's more loopholes to go through when you need rigging or any services from a hotel. So it has changed the way that we do business. I assume that we'll be seeing more of that moving forward. Then with private equity coming in, we'll see a lot of changes, and I assume it's going to be the survival of the fittest, if you will, in the industry. A shift will happen. Do we agree or disagree?
Yeah, shift is
I think you
happening.
still have trust. You still have people that trust you that are still going to use you, right? So I think it comes down to like those relationships.
Yeah, I can't say I disagree. It really, for us, it's a question of, like Terry's company, personalized service, making sure that we're meeting the demands of the client. We're not giving them something cookie cutter. That's not
Yeah.
what a small company does. And that's how we differentiate ourselves. And I assume that's how most of us will have to do so in the future, is continue to innovate and be on the front line creatively. What about other things that come out of meetings that we need to track and be aware of that really do change the conversation? It's not just about economics, in other words. What other things should we be focused on? Talent that comes out of these events, or the relationships that are built out of these events? There is so much more. The local economies that benefit from an event coming into town. Is there anything else that you would say is a benefit to a meeting, people coming together, that wouldn't probably not happen if they didn't come together?
I've heard so many stories of deals being made, products being developed because of 2 people that had a conversation that wasn't necessarily planned. It was a serendipitous meeting, and they start chatting, and it's like, oh, you've got an interest in this and I've got an interest in this, and products grew out of that connection. That's tough to measure because they aren't necessarily going to tell people about that, right, if it's a product or service. But connections like that happen all the time. If there was a way to connect that would be pretty powerful. I mean, years ago I was working on ROI for the industry, for the event industry, and what it came down to is that everything can be measured. All of the success can be measured. All of those measurements can become financial figures. It's really about how much time and money do you have. I mean, technology makes that measurement so much easier and more accessible than it was, say, 10, 20 years ago, which is the good news. And I think the ROI question feeds a lot of the decisions that Carl was referring to about capital investment, right? They know how valuable these events are because there's now a way to gather that information. So I think there are so many ways. I mean, again, convention bureaus, DMOs, they have, many, not all, have found the formula for measuring economic impact that goes beyond sort of the standard numbers. But it's not an easy thing to track, but it is happening all the time and is ultimately trackable, I think.
The thing I think we're missing, and I've talked with many people in the industry about this is the getting the data from the companies that are sponsoring, that are participating, that are, exhibiting. What business have they driven through our events? And like no one has cracked that code. No one
Right.
has. Yeah, obviously they want to hold it close to their vest and, are they going to be, they're self-reporting. Are they going to be honest anyway and all that kind of stuff. But I think there's a lot of power in that if we could get that data.
Can I just throw one more log on the fire? Because I think we're going in a good direction. And we've all been involved in enough events to know that when we measure, why are you coming to this event, or what did you take away from this event? Networking is going to be near the top or the top every freaking time for those accidental meetings that are difficult to design, but they happen all the time. And it's who you know. It's sort of axiomatic. So when you look at any event and it says like, I'm going for networking, it's like, duh, that's proof to me that almost every good event has a networking element to it.
Yes.
Well,
I'm
and to that point, it's, sometimes you hear networking, it's like, are the good parties? Well, that's part of it, but really it is these unscheduled serendipitous moments that I think that's really the key.
Well, and if you can help facilitate that so that it feels serendipitous, but it really isn't, that's even better. And I think that people are catching on to that now and having like designed ways for people to chat with each other. Yeah. I mean, you're right. Yeah. Like, well, Liz Lathan and Nicole Oshibodu and Tom Spano were all at a SEMA conference, SEMA summit, and that on the coffee break, they said to each other, what if this could all be, this should all be a coffee break? What if we had an event that was all coffee break in this serendipitous thing? And they built a business around it. I'm going somewhere internationally on Friday, where I don't know if you guys have heard about the secret family reunion. I'm traveling internationally and I don't know where I'm going in 4 days. With so anyway, that's an aside.
That sounds exciting.
I know.
Very exciting, actually. What about the fact that the data is not necessarily filtering through? In my own experience, my clients are not even sending surveys anymore to their constituents, which concerns me quite a bit. How do we get them to add to the data? How do we standardize the survey or the questions so that we are getting as much of a response as we can? Is there an answer?
There isn't a simple answer. One of the things that strikes me is that this study could be the impetus for helping people understand the importance of sending and responding to surveys. I mean, it's data, right? It's like, so we can say, this is the data that we've gathered on the industry. If you can add to that using your own experience and your own attendees and that sort of thing, how much more valuable could that become? It's hard to believe that people aren't doing surveys, though. That's sort of odd.
I'm a big proponent of Net Promoter Score, and one of the things we're introducing to our school this year is Net Promoter Score measurement. We're going to be talking to the business community as well as former students, and we're going to ask them how likely they are to recommend the Payne School at San Diego State. And you can measure that. It's a well-documented methodology.
Yes.
And if somebody's going to refer you, we all know what a good event is. Like, has anybody heard of IMEX? Like, that would get a very high Net Promoter Score. Like, it's priced right. Everybody's there. I can get in and out fast. Like that's going to have a really high one. We also know the events we don't want to go to. So maybe they're onto something, and maybe maybe there is something to asking something other than a survey. How likely are you to refer that business or that event?
Well, can I take it a step further too and just say, what is anyone doing with the data? Are they actually using it and changing their events based on those 4 responses that they got to the,
Right question, for sure. I think surveys have been worthless for years because we weren't asking. It was, did you like the meeting? Was the room too hot and too cold? The answer to that is always yes. It's both.
Right. Well, and we're right. We're event people.
Like, right? Did you like the food? Who cares, right? I mean,
right.
Anyway.
Right. No, I that's a fair point. I think it really does take professionals coming in and schooling us on what questions we should be asking if we want to continue the meeting and make it, grow. It's a fair point about the data too, and not to get off track, but my own personal response to that is I don't think people want the data. I think the organizers want to build a conference that they want to build, and they get some extemporaneous feedback from people that say it's great, we love it, and that's how they ride the bus. And that's a big miss. Yes, we should.
Yeah.
I wish we could turn the tide, but I'm finding that I'm not the voice that turns the tide. I'm not the one who. I could say it a million times to a client. We should be surveying them, and we don't have to do it in a 20-minute survey. We could section it out and do it across the registry. There are ways to do it to get the information without bogging people down, but it seems that they don't want to.
I think
you have to stop calling them surveys for one. But
there you go.
I agree with that because I think we're inundated.
I think we need to lean into our new organic partner called marketing, because marketing people are experts at measuring the impact of what they do, and otherwise they get fired, like literally. So I do think that meeting professionals, event producers, we all need to think about learning more marketing thinking when it comes to quantifying impacts and results from the activities that we're producing. And I think that would, to me, be should do is everybody learn how to measure like marketers do.
Mm. One last question then for the group, and I think this is one I started with, but we didn't quite answer. Anything from the upcoming report, again, May 6th, we're looking for the report to be dropped, and anything in particular that you think might come of it or that you're looking to see? Is there something that you're focused on in this report? Anybody have any feedback for me?
I want to know about talent. Have we recovered from 2020? Because that was one of the biggest complaints I heard as I interviewed people in the few years that followed, was that people weren't coming back to the industry, and they couldn't find solid people that had enough know-how, or they didn't have the budget to hire the person that had the know-how that they needed and whatnot. I really want to know kind of where we're at talent-wise.
Oh, interesting. That's a good point.
There's a major disconnect on that. We actually, a couple of my faculty here conducted a study for MPI, the HNLA, on the talent gap between what's coming out of society and youth, particularly, and what the industry's real needs and demands are. And there's a big gap. I'd love to see a study that could, help us encourage more people into this profession. But then it becomes a question of if society's youth have changed their work ethic and ethos and what they want, are we going to change to accommodate them, or do they have to change to accommodate employers? And it's a very big conundrum that I don't know if you can address it in that report, but I think the talent, the lack of qualified talent coming in right now is a little scary. A lot of organizations have told me we can't find enough good people. And on the other hand, I got other people saying I can't find a good job. So
Right.
there seems to be a gap, and it seems to be widening between the employer and the potential employee.
There's also the old adage that you can teach people how to do something, but you can't teach them how to have the right attitude. And in our business, it really is a 50-50 split, right? You can do everything great, but if you don't have the right attitude, because you're not going to be working 9 to 5, you're going to be called in the middle of the night, you're going to have to wake up early. There are a lot of things that come with this industry that require a good attitude, patience, the ability to talk with CEOs, the C-suite, and make a point. Is that part of the disconnect? That's something we really don't have any control over, right? We just have to sort of swing from the trees and hope it works.
The ability to breathe before reacting.
Right. Terri, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I wanted to get back to the question about what I'd like to see from the study.
Yes.
I think the greatest opportunity is awareness. and awareness within the industry, right? As I said before, so that we can speak the language of business and of measurement and of economic impact, and the same language that our counterparts are speaking. But also, I think there's an opportunity to communicate the data to those of us that don't understand the industry, which will eventually could help provide support and resources for event professionals, event departments, event budgets, and that sort of thing. But I think my hope is that what we were just talking about with surveys, that you read them and you look for all the nice things that people say about you, and then you file it. I hope that doesn't happen with this, that we all take it seriously, that we mine it for the data that matters, and that we share that we can verbalize that internally and externally. I think that's the value, because otherwise it just is another, piece of information that doesn't change anything. I think it could change everything, but it's going to be up to us to do it.
I'd add something I'd like to see from the study is, because we have a lot of DMOs sort of in the backdrop on this conversation, for them to identify best practice DMOs, I think that would be so powerful, because if we knew that Baltimore did it better than Washington, it's going to be a wake-up call and a tool to the Washington DMO folks to raise the tide. And we can't raise the tide for the whole country. Like, none of us are strong enough, but things like competition and rankings and things like that gets people's attention. If somebody says, hey, Carl, the school up the road is better than yours, I know what's going to happen the next day is I'm going to come in and go, okay, guys, that's not happening. Like, let's get better. I think we have to get more clever about how we inspire to lift ourselves, and then use those data to tell the story.
That's a really good point. Thank you so much. And thank you to our panelists for joining us today. Global Meetings Industry Day is on May 6th. That's a Wednesday this year. Look for the report. If you're in the industry or outside of the industry, it doesn't matter. But if you're in the industry, definitely look for the report. You should know what we're all about and what we're trying to do with the report. And again, I thank you for joining us today, and make it a great one.
Hey, thank you for listening to Bollotta-FIDE.
If you haven't already, please like and subscribe.
And remember to leave us your questions or comments at bollotta.com/podcast.
BollottaFide is a production of Bollotta Entertainment.
Hey, that's a lot of Bollotta. Stay engaging.